Admit all. And hey, y'all, thanks for being with us today. This is Continental Confidential Live number 16 with Elias Haslanger. And welcome, Elias.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it sure is good to have you here. We're on kind of a little bit of a gloomy day right now. It's it's darkened more than just it's nighttime.
Well, I'm kind of a fan of the colder, darker weather for winter myself. We have so much heat and sun that I don't mind a few cooler days here and then. It gives me an excuse to burn some wood in the backyard and act like we have a little bit of a winter sometimes.
Right. I don't mind the chill in the air, I will say that. It's like I'll be out in my t-shirt in this kind of weather without even a sweater or a jacket on. I'm fine. I'm from New York. I grew up with that.
Good, aren't you?
I'm one of those damn Yankees. I came and never left.
We love the damn Yankees. I spent 4 years in Brooklyn, and I love the people up there. Some of the friendliest people in the world, and they're simpatico to Texans because they have that kind of, cavalier, independent attitude.
Right.
Can't tell me what to do.
Right.
But I'll tell you, the cold weather drove me back to Texas. Did not like the snow, did not like the ice, did not like any of that business.
Oh, I was way over winter by the time I moved down here. Because
Yeah.
I was 35, so I'd already spent 35 years in it.
You had your fair share.
I had, indeed.
Hi, Yolanda. Hi, Felipe. Welcome.
Yep, we have Yolanda and Felipe here.
Hello.
So Elias, I have some questions that I wanted to ask you. And let's start with Yolanda. I'm going to mute your microphone. So Elias, I want to start off with asking you, when did you actually have your first gig? What was it?
My first gig was when I was in high school. I went to Austin High. And we put a band together with some friends, and I was also trying to play a little guitar at the time. But this band, I think, was called New World. And New World was kind of I don't know, I went to school in high school in the 80s. So it was kind of like a Police meets new wave kind of a band. And our first gig was at Liberty Lunch.
Nice.
And we played there for about a year, opening up for various bands that were obviously much bigger than we were. But as a high school kid, I thought it was a ton of fun. And, it was my first introduction to bands like the Killer Bees. And a lot of the reggae that came through Austin came through Liberty Lunch,
Right.
And so I was a regular down there quite a bit to listen to that music. But also there was some other music that was going on there. And it was really my first introduction to live music as a performer. I went to a lot of gigs as a kid with my dad because he dragged me around town to listen to music.
Oh, man. Back in the days when most clubs actually still let kids come in as long as they were with their parents.
Right. Yeah, there was never any issue as long as I was with my folks. And even when I was in high school, I'd go to Antone's on Guadalupe.
Yep.
That kind of the heyday of that club. And they would just put a big red X on my hand and tell me not to drink a beer. And then I'd go to the bar and buy one anyway. Don't tell my mom.
Well, I know that at the Continental Club, it used to be the same thing. You know, it's like a lot of kids used to come in all the time. But it got so that people started bringing younger and younger kids. So we had like babies in there. And, you know, some were toddlers and they'd be tripping up the waitresses. And it became a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Especially as Austin grew, you know, back then when I was running around as a kid, it's, you know, you had a couple 100,000 people in Austin total.
Right.
So
yeah. It was a different city then.
much different, much different.
And so while you were growing up, who were your major influences?
Well, you know, when I grew up here in Austin, my mom and my dad were divorced when they were very young, when I was very young. And so I had two households, and they both were remarried, and each of my step parents had a great record collection, and so did my parents. So I actually had 4 record collections to choose from, and there was no television in the house. So we listened to KUT back with Paul Ray, who was a major influence on me just as a person and as a musicologist that he was. And, you know, folks like Jay Trachtenberg, John Ailey, Larry Monroe, the whole crew, you know, we listened to KUT, was pretty much on 24/7 at the house. And then, you know, no television. So I had these record collections to go through. And so I was a very broad set of music, everywhere from classical music to Frank Zappa to James Brown to Stevie Wonder, Dizzy Gillespie, Stan Getz, Chick Corea, Pat Metheny. I could just go on and on and on. You know, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Stones, Emmylou Harris, George Jones. I mean, it really was just everything that I could imagine. And you know, as I got older, and I loved the Beatles when I was a kid. I mean, who doesn't? You know, and as I got older, I started to gravitate a little bit more towards jazz, and so you have people like Pat Metheny and you know, Miles Davis, of course, was a huge influence. And when I got to high school, I had a
No, Elias, you have to unmute.
I don't know what happened.
That was me. I've been trying to mute everybody as they're coming in, and I accidentally hit you.
No problem. So what I was saying is, you know, Miles Davis, when I got to high school, Charlie Parker was a huge influence because I had a band director by the name of LaFalco Corky Robinson, who turned me on to Bird. And he was really the first major saxophone influence on me. And I would go to bed listening to him in 8th grade, 9th grade, trying to figure out what kind of crazy music this was, because I'd never heard anything like it before.
Nice.
You know?
Yeah.
So I would also say that people like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Vaughan, you know, I heard a bunch of those guys down at Antone's, Derek, you know, Denny, Kaz, Flanagan, you know, Marshall Ball, all that whole Austin crew that I heard up close and live, Albert Collins, James Cotton, Buddy Guy.
Right.
Big influences on me growing up, just listening to live music in Austin, you know, and that blues sound that, you know, Austin's so known for. I was right in the front row trying to soak as much of it in as I possibly could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clifford Antone really cultivated that whole scene here in Austin. I mean, granted, there was plenty of music going on before Clifford opened Antone's, but he offered a a whole new playground, if you will, because he was able to bring in some of the masters.
Yeah. Yeah, I never forget seeing Albert Collins, one of the best showmen I've ever seen. Like, with his long cord walking on the bar and
Absolutely.
out into the audience and that
I used to
electric
follow
sound.
him out into the parking lot. He had a 100-foot cord that he could actually go through the club out into the parking lot. Everybody followed him like the Pied Piper.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Loved it. I loved every minute of it. So, growing up in Austin, I had all the records, of course. And as I got older into college, I really got into John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and some of the classic jazz masters that I still listen to today.
Mhm.
But I have to say, one of the big influences of me wanting to be a professional musician was being able to go out in Austin and see these great legendary figures at places like Antone's and Liberty Lunch, and even the Austin City Coliseum had a lot of great shows that would come through there. As
Yeah.
Talking Heads, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, it's just I loved live music, and I would go out to hear it as much as possible. Beto and the Fairlanes was another band that my dad drove me around. Mordecai and Mills and Campisi and Bob Meyer. All those guys were also big influences on me.
And you actually connected, well, to start with, you have the band Church on Monday, and Dr. Polk is one of the members of the band. And you connected with Dr. Polk really early on too, didn't you?
I did. So that story goes, I was in college, and I was really starting to want to get out and play as a jazz musician. And um, you know, he had a band in town with the great Martin Banks and Alex Koch
Yep.
and A.D. Mannion
Mhm.
and a bass player named Dave Morgan. And Dave and I were in school together at the University of Texas. And so Dave would encourage me to come out to hear this band. They're called Jamad. Um, and so, at first it's pretty intimidating, these incredible jazz musicians, but Dr. Polk was always, and still is, such a big, gracious, warm teddy bear,
Right.
And so he would encourage me to come up, and Martin was the same way. Martin Banks would be, come on up here, young fellow, And so I started to cut my teeth a little bit with these elder statesmen, and they would tell you when you're sounding good and when you're sounding bad, but always very encouraging. And so I love that memory. I miss Martin tremendously. I miss AD a lot, but thank God we still have Dr. Polk around.
Yes.
We did my very first recording called Standards back in 1994. Was after I had gone to New York and attended the Manhattan School of Music for a short time. Came back, decided I wanted to do this full time as a musician here in Austin. And so we went into the studio, me and Jeff Haley and Steve Schwelling and Dr. Polk, and we made Standards. That was in 94. So over the years, of course, we had played together, and there was one gig in particular that I played at the Elephant Room in, I think it was 2011, with the great Butch Miles, who's a former drummer for Count Basie. And he's been living in Central Texas, teaching down at Texas State for many years. And he has a band called Butch Miles Express. Well, I was on the gig, and Dr. Polk was on the gig playing piano, and we played a bunch of really swinging blues. And I felt like it was way overdue for Dr. Polk and I to collaborate again. And so that was kind of the seed for Church on Monday, was this gig with Butch, with Dr. Polk. And I had been listening to a lot of this record called Hustlin' by Stanley Turrentine, which had an organ. And I knew from Dr. Polk's history that he was an organ player with Ray Charles. And at the time, Dr. Polk was not playing any organ. He was a pianist, and everybody knew him as a pianist in Austin. So I really wanted to show Austin and the world what an incredible organ player Dr. Polk was, because I knew if you're playing organ with Ray Charles, you know, you're
Right.
probably pretty good. So, I had this idea, okay, I want to put this band together that's kind of got this traditional organ, saxophone, guitar sound. And at the time, Jake Langley was running around Austin, incredible guitarist. And so that was the seed for Church on Monday. We went into the studio in the fall of 2011 and made the first one called Church on Monday. And it was the name of the song, title song of the record that I wrote. And a little funny story, I see my lovely wife, Amy, online right now. I was having a hard time figuring out what to call the song and what to call the record. And she was the one who said, hey, what about Church on Monday? And so I have her to credit for that. And the
Good
reason
job,
why,
Amy.
yeah, we went into David Boyle's Church House Studios on a Monday and a Tuesday to record that first record. So it made sense to do it. And when I called Steve, because I've been wanting to play the gallery for a long time, and the Continental Club, growing up in Austin, legendary club, Steve's legendary figure, huge supporter of the arts and of music. And I just always wanted to do that. It was one of my lifelong goals as an Austin musician, is to be able to play these clubs. And I've been trying and nothing really piqued his interest, but I came to him after we recorded this record, and I'll never forget it. I was sitting on my couch and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to email Steve, tell him about this new project, see what he thinks. And literally within 5 minutes, he was like, let's do it. We'll call it Church on Monday. What do you think about Mondays down at the gallery? And I was like, yes, please. I will do that. And so that was October of 2012.
Uh-huh.
And as you know, we've been down there every Monday until the pandemic hit. And I'm hopeful that we can get back there sometime soon, as long as we can all kind of make it through this.
We're all hoping for that.
Yeah.
It's probably going to take more time than we would like, but Steve has been pretty dedicated to not opening our doors until he feels it's safe for our staff, our musicians, and our patrons.
Yeah.
And at this point, it just isn't.
Yeah. Well, he was a leader there too, because I remember when that first hit and people were wondering, how serious is it? Should we still do this? Clubs were kind of on the fence. And he was leading, he was a real leader there and said, you know what, this is not safe for our employees. It's not safe for our bands. It's not safe for the people coming to the club. So we are going to shut it down.
Yep.
And I remember, a list of folks that kind of followed suit after that. So, I know it's been difficult for all the clubs, and I'm so grateful and hopeful that Steve can hold on, for all three of them, and
Right.
Because to me, it's the heart and soul of Austin.
Well, we're hoping that he's able to hold on to all three. The longer this goes on, of course, the more difficult it becomes. The one thing we know for sure is the Continental isn't going anywhere because he owns it. The other two spaces he leases, and so anything can happen. We're staying positive, but also the reality is anything can happen. We just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed.
But, once we open, you've got a job, kid.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Well, we're hoping that all of our residencies return just exactly as they were. Some may not. We don't know.
Yeah.
But pretty much everybody's going to be offered their residency back. So if you want it, you got it.
I'm here today to tell you, I'm on record. I don't want it back. It's been one of the great joys of my life, actually, Dianne, to be able to sit up there every week with the same guys and have such a loyal fan following, to be able to do 3 CDs. Right. It really does feel like our home, and there's something special that happens there. I can't really explain it. We've played other places. It's not quite the same,
Mhm.
People ask me all the time, well, why don't you go do this or why don't you go do that? I I really have no interest, really. I mean, I don't mind playing other places if they offer it and it's a good situation, but really, as far as a regular thing, it's just we capture magic up there on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah. And you have awards to prove it too.
Yes, my wall behind me, I'm very proud of those. Well, again, growing up in Austin, the Austin Music Awards, I always thought was a pretty prestigious deal, mostly because of all the incredible musicians that run around this town and have for years and years and years and years.
Uh-huh.
So I always felt like, that's a badge of honor to be able to be recognized by people who know, a little something about music.
Well,
But
exactly.
one of the things I love about in Austin too is, I lived in New York for a while and have toured around the United States a little bit. Um, Austin is a very unique music town in that I believe as long as the music is presented honestly, it really doesn't matter what type of genre that you're presenting, and it can be cross genre. We've got all kinds of crazy different bands here that you probably wouldn't do very well in some other markets. But the Austin scene and the Austin people have embraced some of these bands,
Right.
regardless of genre or style.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Um, so Elias, do you consider yourself to be a songwriter?
I do. I actually don't write lyrics. So if that is a qualification for a songwriter, then maybe not. But I would contend that I am a songwriter. I am a composer, probably would be a more apt description. I've written a lot of original material, which are captured on For the Moment, one of my CDs, Kicks Are for Kids, which is the one that featured Ellis Marsalis, Dream Story. And then I've written original music for the Church on Monday debut and also my most recent For Being There. So uh, it's a little bit different. I'll tell you, my wife is a great singer songwriter and she is an incredible poet. So I don't have those skills. So I have never yet to try to put words to melody.
Uh-huh.
So I'm usually the rhythm melody, is how I compose, and I usually do it at the piano.
And now I don't want to put words into your mouth, but don't you feel that even someone who is a composer is a songwriter by virtue of the fact that they tell a story with the notes as much as you do with words?
Absolutely, couldn't have said it better. I read something interesting, I can't remember who posted it, but somebody asked about online recently, what are the greatest Austin songs? And that was it. What are the greatest Austin songs? And of course, you've got a laundry list of incredible songwriters here.
Right.
But almost every one of the answers were songs with words. And so I just posed the question. I thought it was fascinating that there was no discussion of any songs without words. And exactly your point, Dianne, is like, I think that the music tells a story either with or without words.
Right.
And sometimes for me, without words allows you to explore many different types of meanings instead of being brought down a specific path that the lyrics will often bring you down,
Right. I sometimes feel that instrumentals take you on a journey. It's like listening to Sleepwalk when I was a kid um, was just magical for me. And of course, I listened to the Santo and Johnny Sleepwalk, and I would make up my own lyrics for it, and they changed every time I listened to it because it was a different journey every time.
Right. exactly. And it's the same thing with classical music for me as well. It's very, very
Uh-huh.
popular melodies that everybody knows and loves, but there's no words to it. Like, it can mean different things at different times depending on how you're feeling at the moment.
Right. Absolutely. I'm also a big fan of classical music. I grew up playing piano, and uh, my voice teacher had always wanted me to go into opera, which, of course, as a child of the 60s, I couldn't picture that.
Right. Yeah.
From a very young age, I was a ballet dancer too. So at a very young age, I developed a real affinity for classical music. And I think that's one of the reasons that instrumentals speak to me in a deeper way, because
Mhm.
of that background in classical.
Yeah, and I think just being open to different styles and different sounds,
Uh-huh.
and depending on, your background, on what you listened to when you were growing up, I think is extremely important. When my kids were young, they would always want me to put on the pop music station, which I did a lot for them. But then I'd also say, nope, this is daddy's music. We're going to listen to John Coltrane, or we would listen to Brahms. And now they can talk a little bit intelligently about it, and
Uh-huh.
so I think it's important. I think it's very important to expose, kids to all kinds of music early on, because it's a, a pathway and a gateway to expanding your mind and learning. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Have you by any chance ever seen the TV show Bosch?
I don't think I have. I don't watch a ton of
Uh,
television.
it's on Netflix, and Mamie Van Dorn is the one that turned me on to this, because she's a big fan of Titus Welliver, who is the primary actor, and he is the producer of the show. And he plays jazz music in the background all through this show.
I'll have to check it out.
And through some of the episodes, his daughter is living with him, and he's turning her on to jazz. And it's like so cool to watch this process. And the kind of jazz that he's got in the background, whenever he's home, there's jazz music going. And when he's out and about, doing his thing, the soundtrack has jazz. So it's a really cool program. And one of the things I enjoyed most was watching him turn his daughter on to jazz.
Yeah. Well, it's a good tip, Diane. We're always looking for good Netflix. Absolutely. Bosch. Okay.
Yep.
I'll check it out. Yeah, jazz is definitely an acquired taste. It's not on the radio. You have to have somebody kind of introduce you to it, whether it's your parents or maybe a good friend that says, hey, you need to go check this out.
Mhm.
It's not as nearly as commercial as it used to be. And I've read about that sometimes, but then I hear some of the young musicians that are coming up playing it, and I'm like, wow, these, it'll never go away. You got so many incredible young musicians across the world. I mean, it's an
Right.
international music now. I mean, people from Israel, from everywhere, Russia, China, it doesn't matter. Like, they all are equipped now with obviously the internet, and they can go and hear the great masters from the past, and the recordings are all easily accessible. So you'll hear some of these 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that just blow your mind on how great they are. And so I have faith that it'll, carry on in some way or the other. Just a matter of discovery. Where you find it, how you find it, is more of a challenge.
Right. Do you see yourself ever writing a song with lyrics?
Maybe, I'd have to probably do a collaboration, maybe with Alejandro,
Mhm.
or with Amy or somebody. I've thought about it, for sure. I'm definitely thinking about what the next thing is. I always want Church on Monday to keep going and play as long as we possibly can.
Uh-huh.
But also, what are some of the other creative things I can think about and do? And so, putting words to a melody is something I've thought about, but I've never really tried to do it, because I haven't really worked on the poetry side of things. I've done a lot of reading in my life, but I haven't ever tried to actually put it down on paper. But Alejandro, being a great poet himself, and we're good buddies, and he's always pushing me to trying new different things. So maybe I'll put a bug in his ear. Well, maybe we do something together.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Who else would you like to collaborate with?
Oh man. Well, I think Amy would be great. Let me see who else. I think, I had a chance to do a show with Mitch Watkins, and have played some gigs with him in the past. I think he's a brilliant musician and would love to do some more things with him. Locally, I always have admired Charlie Sexton. I think he's quite an amazing talent. I think something, I don't know what it would be, but I'd love to do something with him. I have good friends in the whole Grupo Fantasma Brownout collaboration, Adrian and Beto and those guys. I've traded ideas with Adrian about maybe doing something together. I don't know what that would be. Obviously, he's extremely busy and blowing up now with the Black Pumas, so probably has no time for somebody like me. But maybe in the future we could do something, some kind of collaboration. So those are some of my ideas for local collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And Alejandro, of course, I always love playing with him. We had talked about maybe doing some duo streams and stuff, but things are so weird right now. It's
Right.
just hard to plan or do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was hoping that he'd be coming back to his residency at some point, but who knows when that's ever going to happen. And of course,
Yeah.
it had gotten so that his residency really only happened whenever he was writing for his next album. He'd come out and test out all of his new songs.
Well, and that's his deal, right? He likes to change the bands. He likes to mix it up, and
Yep.
he's never sitting on his laurels. He's got to be always moving and changing stuff up, which is one of the things that I love about him.
Yeah, and don't you think that's one of the things that keeps people relevant in the business is growing and expanding your horizons?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think Alejandro is a great example of that. But even Charlie and Adrian and some of these people that I've mentioned, they constantly looking for new sounds, new collaborations, new things, new bands. So yeah, absolutely. It's critical, and you think about any artist that has had some longevity, somebody like Lady Gaga, or it's constantly trying to reinvent yourself to keep your audience interested, but also keep you interested and engaged and feeling like you're creating and doing something new all the time. It's hard, very hard.
Uh-huh.
Very hard.
And I think, it's like Bob Dylan never really changed what he did. He just kept on doing what he does. But what he did do was he maintained an air of mystery about everything.
Yeah, this
he didn't
guy.
spend a lot of time explaining his lyrics or, trying to tell people what he was doing. And so you either have to be willing to change and grow, or if you're going to stay the same, you have to have another hook.
Yeah, well, his legendary career, wow. And he just sold his catalog.
Yes.
I wonder how much that was for.
300 million.
Wow.
Yeah, he'll be able to retire now.
I bet he's just fine. Yeah, of course, Charlie's played with him forever.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some stories from him on that.
He doesn't tell them.
I know.
When I had the newsletter Continental Confidential going for 20 years. And so the one time that I made it into Rolling Stone magazine was because Denny Freeman had told me that he had just left Dylan and that Charlie was going back. And I put it in the newsletter.
You got the scoop.
And I had the scoop. And the next time I saw Charlie, he came up to me and he goes, "Where did you get that from?" And he said Dylan was pissed off because he didn't want people knowing. He wasn't ready for that yet. And yeah, so I didn't know I wasn't supposed to say anything.
You got the good stuff.
And it was just in my newsletter, I mean, it wasn't like I was broadcasting it on TMZ.
Right. I didn't know Denny Freeman played with Dylan for a while.
Oh, yeah. Yep. After Charlie left, Denny became the other guitarist.
Gotcha.
And Denny left and Charlie came back. Yeah.
A little bit of tidbit of history there that
A little bit.
I never realized.
It's
That's
safe
cool.
to tell now.
Yeah.
So what's your next plan? What have you got going right now?
It's a good question. Mostly focusing right now on getting the kids through pandemic learning, which thankfully today was the last day of school for the semester, and they did an amazing job of finishing up. It was hard, very hard. But musically, and so my family is a big part of my life, and it's a main focus for me. I am very lucky to have two daughters that are beautiful and talented and lovely wife. And so we spend a lot of time together, obviously under the roof over the last 9 months or so, trying to keep the kids entertained and engaged and ourselves entertained and engaged. I know it's been tough for a lot of people. We're lucky that, we've stayed healthy, knock on wood, and we plan on staying that way. And so, we're just trying to keep it together, personally. That's job one.
Right.
And as far as music goes, I've had a chance to do a couple of live streams with my buddy Colin Shook, who I saw was on earlier. He's got this online streaming series at Monks, and through the Austin Jazz Society, one of the streams that we did raised over $2,000 for musicians who are out of work in Austin. Collectively, the Austin Jazz Society has raised over $86,000 for local musicians and have distributed that, which I think is incredible. But he also has, series that aren't associated with the Austin Jazz Society, so that you can go and play. It's a little weird. There's no audience, but at the same time, people have been very generous with their donations. So musicians are actually able to play and make a little bit of money on that gig. So that's been fun. And then I've talked a little bit about putting together a trio with my buddy JJ Johnson, who just got the gig with Gary Clark. So he may be unavailable, but he's expressed interest in doing this with my buddy Bruce Saunders, who's a guitar player. So it'd be a bassless trio, something different, something interesting. I listened to a lot of Bill Frisell, who's done this in the past. So that's kind of one of the sounds that I have in my ear. And then also I thought about doing a duo, just me and JJ. This just is creative stuff. Of course, I love to keep Church on Monday going, and I also have a quartet that I play with of more traditional jazz music. And Andre Hayward, Mike Saylors, Ephraim Owens are all frequent collaborators. Mm-hmm. And so finally, a duo with my piano buddies, I've thought about and talked about Sean Giddings, Eddie Hobazal, and God rest his soul, Rich Harney, before he passed, we were talking about doing some collaborations together. So I've got a few things in the back of my mind, Diana. I mean, Diane, I've, it's been tough to be inspired, frankly, and to stay inspired. I think, you know, I've talked to Alejandro about this. He was like, hey, I get a vacation, you know? And so he's, a lot of musicians I know have been like okay with putting down the music for a while, which I have done. But it's gnawing at me a little bit. Like I need to practice, I need to write, I need to get back out there and play. But it's a challenge, you know. You don't have any place to do it, so it's hard to get motivated when you don't see any gigs on the horizon or the ability to collaborate on a regular basis. You know, I know early on in the pandemic, I was extremely concerned about getting together with anybody.
Right.
We really didn't know how, you know, infectious this was, how deadly it was. And so I resisted kind of, even in safe environments, getting together with people until we figured out later that, okay, there are some spaces where you can still do this. But just having the normal, like go to a rehearsal complex and hang out with your buddies all afternoon in a very tight space with no masks, probably not a good idea, right? And so how to kickstart that again and get that whole creative process is something that we still are trying to figure out how to do. So, you know, I'm hopeful that in the next 3 to 6 months we can get back to that. And I do have some ideas about what's next. I'd like, you know, I like your ideas about writing maybe some lyrics and collaborating with some other people. I think that's got me thinking a little bit how I might do that. So who knows? But yeah, you know, it's hard to imagine when the gigs have all gone away.
Right. Have you done any live streaming in the last 9 months, Elias?
Yeah, for the monks stuff. So I did 2 for Colin, and those were very successful and a lot of fun.
But none of your own.
Not from my house, no. You know, I did do a couple for Amy. She did Kick Cancer. I can't remember the name of it, but she did a cancer fundraiser live stream. And we also just did one out of the house, and it's a little bit easier because she can be a solo artist.
Right.
And so we put the camera up and did the software, and it came out pretty fun. It was nice, you know. We'd like to do more of that. It is an endeavor though, you know, you have to buy the equipment and you have to learn the software, you have to have the time dedicated aside. And so it's not just as easy as like flipping on your phone and going, right? There is a little bit more involved there. But I have not personally done any live streaming from our house, it's mostly been Amy.
Well, as you can see, I'm still learning Zoom. I was pretty good with Facebook Live, but then I wasn't able to upload those to YouTube. So when I decided to do this, I decided to go with Zoom, and I just kind of went headlong into it without ever learning anything about it. It was all just on the job training. And so, you know, it's like what happened on Wednesday was just this weird thing that somehow in the process of things, some settings got changed. And I swear I didn't do it. And yet how it would have happened otherwise, I don't know.
That's our brave new world, isn't it, Dianne?
Oh my gosh, it sure is, you know. And thankfully, I'm an old dog that likes to learn new tricks.
Well, one thing you might consider is YouTube does have a live broadcast option. And so you can go directly from there, and then obviously you have it on that platform archived for you instantaneously. So,
however, I believe that you have to have a certain number of followers before you can do that.
I see.
That was my understanding anyways. So right now once we do it live on Zoom, and then I upload the video to the Continental Club, the Gallery, and Sea Boys, and our YouTube channel, which for the record is Continental Club ATX on YouTube, and all one word, because if you split it up, you end up with 10 million videos that have nothing to do with Continental Confidential Live.
Gotcha.
So there you go.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and enjoyed speaking with you. And we countless times run into technical difficulties on our side, so I certainly understand.
Well, I'm really happy to have you here. I think, and Steve is a big fan of jazz.
Oh yeah.
So he's tried to, keep up the jazz tradition as much as possible. And of course, we can't offer a steady diet of it the way that like the Courtyard or other places have. And I don't know who really, the Elephant Room, I know, but what other primarily jazz clubs are there anymore? Where would people go to see jazz when they can go there?
In Austin,
Yeah,
there isn't any.
yeah.
I'd say the Gallery and the Elephant Room, and then the road shows that come through, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, my buddy Colin Shook and his Monks pop-up series, that was an excellent series. And the way he did this was he would just rent out different places and then announce the show the week of and get a bunch of people to come out. It was a little bit different model. But if you follow his email list or his website or what have you, now he's obviously transformed it all online and it's all live streaming now. But I think when we get out of this, he's got big plans to, carry on that live club, pop-up club kind of concept. And so for sure, he's one to look for. And he's right in the middle of the jazz scene himself, being a great pianist. But he also knows everybody that's, up and coming and has good bands together. So he's got the programming as well.
Good tip.
Yeah.
And that's Colin Shook, COLINSHOOK.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the Gallery, of course, is a great little room. And I think it does really well for jazz.
Yes.
And thankfully, Mike and Steve have the organ up there, which has been instrumental. But even so, people bring their keyboard for piano and guitar, and it's a nice, tight little room. Obviously, this, but it sounds great. And I don't even have to put a microphone on my instrument,
The acoustics in that small room are amazing.
They really are.
Yeah. Yep. And Steve now has a B3, a Hammond B3 with a Leslie cabinet in all three of our venues.
Which is awesome and quite rare. As Dr. Polk tells me, that used to be the case in every club across the United States. But it's just very rare now that you have that, even one club, not to mention, all three.
Right.
So that's incredible. And, but we got people like Red Young and Mike Flanagan and James Polk. Well, why not?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the thing with the caliber of talent that we have access to. Why wouldn't you have one in every venue?
And it's such an amazing sound,
Yeah,
it's just,
it is
one of those sounds that goes right through you, and it just is an incredible vibration.
Right. And with those Leslies, man, you can't beat it.
Yeah, no, you cannot. I remember the first time I really heard one was Jimmy Smith did a show in Austin at Cedar Street Courtyard, back when Cedar Street was doing jazz. And he didn't bring one Leslie, he brought two Leslies. And he sat them up on both sides of the stage, and it was cranking. And I was electrified. I'd never heard anything like it before. Obviously, Jimmy Smith being one of the legendary organ players of all time, but It was amazing. So I'm a fan.
Cool. So I do want to put in a little bit of a plug that Elias has very kindly recommended that any tips or donations be made to the staff, to the Continental Club, the gallery, and Seaboys employees. And you can find the tip jar at www.continentalclub.com/closed. I wish we could change the name of that. I hate that being the place that people have to go to to give us money.
Yeah.
But that is the page that gives us all the information about what's going on. And, you know, when we are no longer closed, that's where you'll find it.
Yeah.
And if you want to buy merch right now, we're running this really good deal where we have bands that have donated either t-shirt designs or actual t-shirts to us, where the staff and the club get a portion of the proceeds. And we've got some, like the Gourds, never had a t-shirt ever. And Kevin Russell put together something. So we are selling a Gourds t-shirt.
Very cool. Limited edition.
Limited editions. And, you know, we've still got some more that are coming in. We're getting some from Rocky Erickson. Jagar's arranging that. And we're getting some from Charlie Sexton. And there's a bunch of other people now that have jumped on the bandwagon to make sure that we have shirts.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So if you go to our merch page, which is continentalclub.com/Austin-shop, and you can find everything that's for sale there, just our regular line of stuff, plus this additional special limited edition of t-shirts.
Very cool. Yeah, right at the beginning, I bought a bunch of stuff. I got my hat, I got my t-shirt, I got my bumper sticker, I got my koozie. Yeah, I did it all. So yeah, it's a great, I mean, obviously we're sending out our, you know, our heart to everybody that's been impacted and can't work, you know, and I consider you guys part of my family, you know, Kate and the whole crew, Smiley. I miss them.
Right.
And I wish them the best, and I wish everybody down at the club, all the clubs, the best, and hopefully we'll get through this sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and you know, at this point, we're kind of all in it together. It's there's not one club that's any worse off than any others. Everybody is struggling. All the musicians are struggling. And you know, the whole tour industry is in very bad shape. I have some friends that are tour managers, and it's not looking good, you know. But you know, we're going on as best we can. And somehow, Elias, there we go.
I muted because my little dog is barking.
Oh. Well, usually it's my cats at the door asking to come in all during.
That's exactly what's happening now. She's scratching at the door and barking and saying, "Daddy, let me in, let me in."
Right. And I usually have two cats right outside the door here that are meow. And I don't know where they are. They're not here.
The little fur babies have helped get us through this.
Oh boy, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually been very good for a lot of the shelters and the rescue groups, because they've been able to adopt out a lot of pets.
I heard that. That is great.
Yeah. So, Elias, thank you so much for doing this with me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you,
And
Dianne.
it's always such a pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be able to speak with you. And chat a little bit, have a little bit of fun during this crazy time. I hope you have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you. Yes, Christmas is coming up. It is right around the corner.
It is.
And next week on the 23rd, I will be here with James Entfeld, who's one of our regular road shows.
Cool.
And then on Christmas Eve and Christmas night, I'll be airing a pre-recorded interview and music portion of Christmas carols with Sam Greyhorse, the Sixth Street Cowboy,
Yep.
and the combo of Troop Barrel and Sniz.
Oh, cool.
And so we'll have them all on for Christmas Eve and Christmas night.
That's great.
So until then, thank you all for joining me. And of course, my fabulous guest, Elias Haslanger.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Elias. It's just a treat.
Bye. Thanks, Diane. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye, y'all.
Cheers.